Hey guys, what is going on? We are in the zone. I'm here as always with Giancarlo Aulino. Today we are going episode 216, and it's the annual Leafs elimination video. What is next? What to expect moving forward with this organization? Aulino, there's probably a lot of big changes coming. I know we just saw the locker clean out day yesterday. A lot of players obviously optimistic. Oh, I love playing here. I'm not going to move this, that, the other. But Alino, what did you make of this series against Florida? Because I did predict Florida would beat Boston. I'm proud that I predicted that. But I was saying to you after Florida beat Boston that this was probably the best scenario for the Leafs, and they come out, played terrible at home in games 1 and 2. I mean, you could argue it was a close game, but they didn't win the battles when they had to. They go down 3-0. They give us hope in game 4, and then game 5, we get eliminated. Does this elimination in 5 games warrant a big enough change, or are you kind of playing still that cautious approach with these guys?
No, no, this is a big change now has to come. Like before they were dicking around, getting by for the first round, and like, oh, it was a game 7, it was the Boston. Every year was the excuse. The Columbus year, I thought, is when they really had to make some changes. But again, they were lucky it was COVID. So they had the cop out there. We were off for a few months. Some of the guys were coming in, they got the vaccine, they were a little injured, some of them, not up to speed. Then after they gave them the Montreal series there, where everybody was like, "Oh, it was COVID again. What are you gonna do? Some of these guys are young." Oh, it's excuse after excuse. Now I think they're figuring out they're running out of excuses. The ownership's looking at this team. They're the breadwinner of MLSC. They're the most valuable team, and they're the only one that hasn't won a championship under the MLSC umbrella. So I think ownership is going to have to step in here. I don't know what they're promising to like Dubas if he had an extension, if they were talking about one after the deadline, but if they're not satisfied with what he's going to tell them, then I think it's going to be time for a GM change, coaching change, and even a president change because Shanahan's to blame here too. He go let Lou Lamoriello go. He chose Dubas. Hunter was there. He walked. They got rid of Babcock. They gave Dubas his own guy to come in, and it didn't work all these years. So I think there has to be a change coming up.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the coaching and Dubas, because Dubas, I got to give him his flowers the last couple of years, specifically during the Columbus series. A lot of people were saying, it's his third year with the team. I think you got to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. He went out, he got Foligno, he got Galchenyuk. He tried making those moves that would work. It didn't work. I don't think he did enough those years, but this year, man, he really, I think, laid a foundation for this team to be an elite contender, and it just didn't come. I mean, Achari played well. I thought at times Lafferty, I was surprised he was in and out of the lineup. I thought he was deserving of being in every playoff game. He brought that physicality, that speed, that forecheck. And of course, we got to talk about Ryan O'Reilly. This guy, Conn Smythe winner. It's not easy to attain a Conn Smythe winner on a team that's as stacked as the Leafs. And Dubas somehow managed to do it. And I got to give him credit. But at the end of the day, the results did not come. I think you kind of, at this point in time, Shanahan should look at his cards. Not a lot of GMs available, Aulino. You look at the playing field, it's not the greatest right now. I know Bergevin is getting interviews. I know what the hell was his name back in Boston? He's getting interviews now. He's looking to make his return. Shirelli. So there's not a lot of good options, I think, for this Leaf core. And I honestly think if you have to keep one of the two, I think the better option is keeping Dubas. I think he's done a lot with this team. He's put a lot of passion into the moves. You see how heated he gets. He's into it. I think he rides with these boys. But you look at Keith, man. I'm not trying to point the finger by any means to him, but when it came to coaching, he got out coached in the first series against Cooper. He got outcoached in the second series against Paul Maurice. And Aulino, I'm probably going to rant about this in about 10 minutes or so, but you talk about Marner and Matthews. When both of them are not going, why would you keep them on a line for a whole series when you know Willie's buzzing? You know Matthew Nyes wants to get that extra shift out there. You know, even at times, man, I hate to say it, David Kampf was looking amazing. If you really want to boost his confidence, maybe mix it up. Put him on a line with Matthews. I mean, his forechecking ability is elite. So I think at the end of the day, Aulino, you look at these two guys. I think Keefe is the guy that's probably the odd man out just based off his coaching strategy. Would you agree or would you disagree that Keefe is the more likely guy to go?
I think if Dubas is gone, like he technically is a free agent. Like right now, he can go to Ottawa and say, "Hey, I'm coming over. I'm gonna get Keefe. I'm gonna get all these guys to come with me," because he's technically a free agent. But if the Leafs go and say that we're not going to bring him back, we're not going to offer him an extension, I think the writing will be on the wall for Keefe because that's Dubas's guy. They got rid of Babcock, $7 million. I think they're still paying him right now. So for Dubas to go and swing that kind of deal and get the ownership to okay that means they're expecting results. And if even though Toronto played pretty well and had some close games in the second round, I don't think they're too like happy with only one extra win in the second round. So that's why I think the blame might fall on Dubas, and he might be the easy one to just say, you know what, we'll go with another GM. We don't have to pay him anything. And Keefe, they'll probably say we're going to just get rid of him because look at the Rangers. They had Gallant there. They had a stacked team. The GM went and got Patrick Kane and Tarasenko, and he ends up losing his job because they didn't produce results. So I think it's going to fall on both of them. And if you're taking both of them out and you start looking around at GMs around the league, I don't think Brian Burke is interested in being a president anymore. And like, I think he'll just go back to media. But like Sutter's out there, like a guy that will get accountability as a GM, not as a coach. But maybe you get a new regime in here, and might be Shanahan's last chance. So it's going to be a tough next 3 to 4 weeks because I think by the draft, I think they'll want everybody in check and they'll want to know who they're drafting, their identity, and they won't want to just have this linger on until like end of July.
Well, it's a good thing you brought up the draft because the draft is in late June and they need to get this stuff on the roll because they have to be at the table to draft somebody. They can't just be relying on the MLSE owners and Shanahan. I mean, Shanahan used to play, but you need the support there. So I think they need to actually jump into action a lot sooner than people think. And that's a good thing too, because it is fresh. You're fresh off the loss. The media is in a frenzy right now in Toronto. So I think it's good to capitalize on that. I think, honestly, you made a great point. I think Dubas, if he does go, I think Keefe, it's a foregone conclusion that he's gone. But you look at the amount of coaching options that are out there right now over managerial, and to me, it stands out. I mean, can you imagine Daryl Sutter being here as a coach? I feel like that would be a huge regimen switch. Like talk about accountability. You got to be accountable behind that guy because if you're not playing. You're going to be riding pine. So I think they do need a little more of an old school approach. We all saw it with Lou Lamoriello and Babcock. The guys were a lot younger back then, but I think if you could bring in an old school coach here, obviously I think Quenneville coming here would just cause a huge stir. I don't know if that would work out, but you have Quenneville, you have maybe Barry Trotz. I think he just got a managerial opportunity there in Nashville. But there's a couple big time guys out there that are available. So I've heard rumors that Lindy Ruff might get fired. Again, you mentioned Gallant. He's a hell of a coach. I think it's easier to get a new head coach than a new GM at this point. But if you're the Leafs, change it's imminent, right? So I think you just have to go with it. I think at this point, bite the bullet, take your embarrassment. You lost for the 7th straight year, and you got to see what's gonna be happening moving forward. But now I want to go on to the players, Aulino, and this is where it gets really dicey and interesting because this whole narrative is the core four, right? how successful can the core four be every single year? And I mentioned this in so many podcasts. We brought up they had to bring in guys like Thornton. They brought in Marlowe. They brought in Placanitz. They brought in Foligno. They brought in Giordano. They brought in the amount of leadership that they have brought in to this team is absurd, man. I think they've brought in 5 or 6 former captains, and they still somehow cannot get the job done. Now, does that mean they don't have full on faith on Tavares being a captain? I don't know. That's a whole other situation here. I've been hearing everywhere, Aulino, strip Tavares of the C, give it to Riley. He's more deserving of it. I guess I'll start over there with the captain. What do you think about John Tavares, Aulino? Do you see him sticking around? I know it's 11 million. It's a very hard contract to trade, but are you pulling the Patrick Marleau approach here and stripping him of the C if you have new management?
I think it would have been. It might be tough to do that because I think that was one of the promises when they signed him. They said that he'll eventually be the captain, and now all these years later, they probably expected to have a Stanley Cup by now and make that transition a little easier. Like San Jose went and had some successful years where they were close to like the conference final, and they decided, you know what, let's give Thornton the C, and we saw what happened thereafter. So I don't see it happening. The only way I see it happening is if Tavares gets moved, and maybe Matthews signs a new extension. He'll like maybe do a 7 year or a full 8 and say, okay, fine, I'll be the captain. I'll get the 8 years. If not, I just see Tavares. It'll be the same old. He'll be the captain. They'll have their leadership core there with Matthews and Riley, and they'll go from there. But I think it might be a little hard if you take the C off him because this media market, they'll ask 10,000 questions a day, create narratives. Like we saw the Phil Kessel hot dog story. Just imagine if you had a full year now, Tavares with an A and Matthews with a C or Riley with the C, it would turn into a soap opera. Every day will be a new episode over there. So I think they want to avoid that as much as they can.
Yeah, you know what, man? I think if you're gonna make change and you're gonna try and just completely change the whole culture, the whole morale, I think getting rid of Tavares as the C, I think it could be a good idea. But you mentioned it perfectly. You look at the drama, you look at the media, and here in Toronto, I think that would also diminish his play. And we're already kind of not happy with how he's playing compared to his salary. So I feel like if you do that, it's basically saying, yeah, you know what, Tavares, basically, there's the door. We don't want you here. So again, you strip a guy of a seat, it could completely change the morale, or you could be a pro's pro like Patrick Marleau was and stay on the team and make things work. So I think if they're going to end up trying to do that, Aulino, I think Tavares is a guy that could say, you know what, Riley is deserving of it. Why don't you give him the C? I'll be the A, and we'll run it back for the culture. But in this day and age, it's very unlikely. So I think Tavares, you look at what he's been able to do since coming here. The first year, he had 47 freaking goals, Aulino. He was amazing his first year here. I think he was 28 his first year here. Phenomenal, phenomenal. And then all of a sudden, I'm not going to blame Corey Perry, but that injury that he took in that Montreal series, man, that really diminished, I think, not only his foot speed, but just his overall productivity. So we got to wait and see with John Tavares. But Aulino, do you think there is a team out there that would go out and get John Tavares? Or do you think at this point in time, it's kind of like a Carey Price, Erik Karlsson situation where you have to retain at least 50 to 40% to get it done?
I think there would be teams that would be willing to get him if he was a free agent. Like I think they would all line up and see if there's a way to bring him in. But at 11 million, I think with 2 years left, it's too hard. Like if he was in the last year of this deal, like if this is taking place next year, and I don't want to jinx it already, but let's just say next year at this time he has a similar type of season, same type of productivity. He shows that he can maybe get like 35 goals, not as slow as other years, and he moves to the wing, but you see that off the wing, he's a little bit more explosive and contributes more. I think they would take a chance, but with 2 years left, I think they don't want to do it just because, let's say, he goes into a new team this coming year and is just a shell of what he was before. Gets like 20 goals the most, like 50 points, really slow as a center, and just becomes a liability. Then they'll probably be a little hesitant because then that's another year after that of 11 mil that they would have to buy out.
Yeah, it's tough with JT, man, because this is a guy that used to get 85 points every single year, and his 5-on-5 play is completely diminished the last couple of years. Say what you want about our power play. We get it. You know, it's one of the best in the league. The production on our power play, it boosts guys like Marner, Matthews, Nylander, and Tavares. But I did hear a stat, Aulino, and it really did concern me. He only had about 45 even strength points this year. And when you're getting paid that much money, it's definitely concerning. And that just signals that there is regression in his game. And it sucks to say because we've seen the greats, man. Like, look at Jamie Benn the last 4 years. He was putting up like 50 points. All of a sudden this year, he goes on a line with Robertson and Hintz, and he's out back at 75 points. Now, is he going to do that by himself? Absolutely not. But I think Tavares needs to start understanding that he's not the same guy he was. He needs guys to rely on. So I think if you put Tavares on the wing with Matthews in a full season, that could boost him tremendously. And not only can that boost his production, but his confidence. And when you have a confidence that's boosted, you're a different player. So I hope, the whole Tavares situation is definitely tricky. Don't really know what to make of it right now. But if I had to guess, I think he's back next year on this team. But moving on, I want to go on now to Mitch Marner. This is a player that, as the series went on in Florida, he did not look like he was himself. He was in the Tampa series, he was pretty good, not consistent, but in the big time games like Game 3, setting up Matthews and making a lot of those creative plays, that's what he's good at. But when it came to the Florida series, Aulino, I don't know if you agree with me or not, he just looked kind of scared, and that's been the narrative with Marner since the playoffs, since we started going in the playoffs. I just feel like he's a guy that just, when it comes to the playoffs, he shies away from physical play, which I know it's not his game. But look at what Patrick Kane used to do. He was smaller than Marner, and he would still kind of be physical, and he would be dominant in the postseason. What did you make of Marner's postseason, Aulino? And do you think he's a guy that could potentially be moved after the postseason performance he had?
I know, like, it just because of his contract, but I would hesitate to trade Marner. Like, you're not going to get that kind of production out of him and whoever you bring in. Like, without him, does Tavares get that many points? Like, that's going to be even worse after, because if you bring a guy in who's not a playmaker, who's, let's say, you got a defenseman back, like, that's only going to make things worse on your depth at forward. And Tavares is going to probably be a little bit more exposed. Like, he plays with Matthews throughout the year, and we saw the kind of productivity he had. He was probably their MVP this year as a forward. If you lose that, like, it's not easy to get that kind of creative player that sets up his teammates and puts him in a position to succeed. He draws too much attention to himself, where if he's playing with a Tavares, you can put him on the wing in power play and you can get his shot in and maybe make up for the speed loss there. So I would actually, I think they should experiment. I know they were trying to talk about maybe moving him at defense early on in the year. With how lacking of speed they are back there, I wouldn't be opposed to Marner moving into becoming an offensive defenseman next year.
That would definitely be different. I think when you think of Mitch Marner, again, this was probably his best year by far. When you think of overall as a player, I did say to you and to a lot of the people that I talked to about sports, I think he was our best player this year. I think he was if you had a Hart Trophy for Leaf players, he was our best player in the regular season. But Aulino, man, when it comes to the playoffs, every single year, like, it's just he doesn't show up. And I don't know, like, again, I know there's some guys that are meant to do well in the playoffs and not meant to do well in the regular season. Look at Sam Bennett. This guy puts up, 45 points in the regular season and 20 in the postseason? Like, I know there's guys that are different. They have different DNA, but I think at this point, man, you look at Marner, he was set up for success this whole playoff run, playing with Matthews, playing with Tavares, playing with all these unbelievable players on the first power play unit. And he didn't produce, man, in the second round because of the lack of physical play. Like, where was the Mitch Marner of game four the whole postseason? Like, Mitch Marner in game four was easily our best player on the ice, hitting, getting that big time goal. But game one, two, and three, he might have been our worst player, Aulino. And like the meaningless turnovers in our zone, that's not the Selke guy we know. So it's just, I think when it comes to the physical play, I don't know if it's a mental block because that's been the Leafs fans' excuses forever is, oh, they're as good as they are. It's just a mental block. We beat the first round, and it looks like we didn't beat the first round because we lost in five. So it's just one of those where, like, I love Mitch Marner as a player. I think he is outstanding, arguably the best player on our team. But when it comes to the playoffs, you need those guys to produce. And if you can trade a Mitch Marner, now I know you're not going to get a guy as good as Mitch Marner in return, but if you can get the pieces to bring that success, Aulino, and you let Matthew shine and you let Nylander shine, I think this team could be deadly. Because, Aulino, let's talk about it. Let's talk about our weakness, our defense. How slow is our defense? Justin Hall, TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, Jake McCabe. These guys can't skate. Luke Shen was probably our best defenseman. I'll get into Luke Shen in a little bit. But if you could trade Mitch Marner, man, and you can get a top four elite defenseman, I think that completely changes this team completely, honestly. And I'm not a Mitch Marner hater at all. I love him, but I think if you can get a guy like a Shea Theodore, a Zach Werenski, a Provorov, a Sergachev, like one of these type of D, you're rolling. And that would boost Riley so much. So I feel bad for Riley. He's been struggling forever. He finally gets Luke Shen. He has an elite playoffs. I think Mitch Marner, man, honestly, it is it's hard to believe, but I wouldn't be surprised if they actually went with the idea of potentially trading a guy like him because I know William Nylander's the odd man out. He has a year left. You're losing that trade regardless. Like, let's say you do Willie for a D, you're losing the trade. So this brings you to William Nylander, man. The guy had a phenomenal. I thought he was pretty good in the playoffs. The Panthers series, he was great. He scored when he had to. The first two games, like I said, top four and the big four in the first two games were just not there. But Willie in game 3, 4, and 5, he was there. He really tried. Aulino, do you think William Nylander is a guy that we can afford to keep? He's getting 6.9 million. First, I'll ask, what do you expect his next contract to be? And do you think the Leafs are more likely to trade a guy like William Nylander at this point in time?
Yeah, I think they'll probably trade him. I think his next contract will start at 8 to 8.5 and work its way up from there. I think if you were to trade him, I would look at Vancouver again because like Pedersen's there, you have Nylander, you can have them two play together. I think it makes sense for both players, and I don't know who else. They obviously not going to give Hughes back. That would be a dream, but
Oh,
if you can get it like a defensive prospect from there that they're high on, that's probably a year away, and a roster defenseman, maybe a Besser, like someone like that, and draft picks that you can center around the trade, maybe they would be open to that. That's probably like the best case scenario for Toronto. But if you're gonna make just a solely like one for one deal, you're gonna lose that trade. So I think regardless, it might be hard to afford him. If you have everybody under contract, you would have to probably move Tavares to make that realistic to free up the 11 million. But with Matthews' deal now coming up and Marner's deal after that, he'll probably want like close to 11 and a half. I don't think you can keep Nylander at under $9 million if Tavares is on the team too.
yeah, that's why, man. I think you have to trade one of them. The salary cap stuff is just inflated, and I mean, it's getting to the point where it's getting laughable. Like, if you really want to be on a winning team, you have to take pay cuts. Let's be real here. The amount of Nathan McKinnon is the perfect example. Before his new contract, they were out there. They got rid of Duchesne. They got rid of so many, like O'Reilly, Duchesne. Can you imagine? You have both those guys and you trade them just to bring a McKinnon. And McKinnon says, yeah, you know what? I got 90 points in this season, but I'll sign for 6.6 because I want to win. And what happens? On his last year of his contract, they win the Stanley Cup. So, Aulino, I know it's probably not going to happen, but you have to start thinking if you're Matthews, if you're Nylander, why would you like what makes you think you could get 3.5 million more than what you're getting right now when there were no results at all? Now Matthews you could argue because he had 60 goals and he won 3 trophies. But like still like he didn't they didn't win anything. Like are you really giving Matthews 13 million, Alino? Like are you actually going to give him 13? I think best case scenario for the Leafs, you give him 12.7 million, a million more, or sorry, 100,000 more than Nathan McKinnon. Because if Matthews goes out there and says, I want 14 million, this team is doomed. They're not going to win anything. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's best that they take a pay cut because Crosby did it, McKinnon did it, and that worked out just fine?
Yeah, I think he knows that MLSE is loaded and they can afford it. So I think they're gonna. It's the only way that, like, when you realistically look at it, other than Ovechkin, who's been the goal scorer of the league, like consistently, like Matthews has been putting up those kind of numbers since he came in. So he's gonna always use that, and it's gonna probably work. He's a star player. He brings a lot of attention to the team, the cover of the video game. Like he's one of the faces of the league. So that's going to play in his favor. I think they know that their hands are tied in that negotiation. So that's why they have to play salary cap and LTIR and maneuver from there. And I think that's going to be the difference maker. And it shows why teams like Vegas have been successful at doing it, circumventing the cap. Tampa's been successful at it. Toronto, it looked like they found something here when Muzzin went to the LTIR. If he was healthy to come back, they would have been rolling. So I know it's just a salary thing. I think Gary Bettman has to just step in and say we're going to do a luxury tax. If your team goes 5 million over, you got to pay $10 million, and they can probably find a way to fund that team in Arizona, and they can be profitable for once in their existence. So if I'm Gary Bettman, I'm introducing a salary luxury tax rule where if you go a certain amount over, you got to pay Arizona X amount of dollars and build up some prestige in that market because they're in a 5,000 seat arena. And that new building, if I'm the owner, I don't think it's going to be paying itself. So let's start looking around the league for some money.
So you think it's either there's a luxury tax, Matthews is a coyote, or they're moving to Quebec City?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but I want to quickly talk now about. I mean, we did talk about the core four basically. Now I want to talk about all our UFAs because there's a shit ton of them, Aulino. Like a lot, like 8, and we all have it here. Beautiful, cap friendly for us. We're gonna start it off with the guy Michael Bunting. Now, Bunting was getting paid what $900,000, coming off 60 points, and then I think this year he had what like 48 to 50. I don't know how. Don't get me. I don't know how much he had exactly, but he had a down year compared to last year. Aulino, is he staying or is he going?
Yeah, if I'm Bunting, I'm passing on my resume around the league, LinkedIn profile, going around to different GMs and saying, "How can I play for your team?" Because I don't think they're going to say if he goes up and says $4 million. I think they're going to say, "Yeah, buy a new jersey and go from there. Yeah, your locker, clean it out. We're going to look elsewhere," because I don't think he's going to have that kind of Zach Hyman clout to him. So Bunting, it was a nice year, but I think they'll take their chances because they saw that Matthew Nyes came into the lineup when he got suspended, and he showed he's probably better at his age right now, and he's only making 900K. So I think it's Matthew Nyes coming in and it's Bunting coming out.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think you hit that spot on as well. Even during the year, you saw at times when Bunting was just not producing, they just put Yarncroc in there and he thrived with Matthews. So they do have the options there. I know Yarncroc's getting paid a lot more than expected, but I do think he is expendable now just based off of how great Matthew Nyes was for this team. But I want to keep on rolling here. Alex Kerfoot is another guy that is a free agent. And he somehow has survived, Aulino. I don't know how many trade rumors this guy has survived for the last 3 years. Aulino, is this finally where Kerfoot is buried and he's going to a new team, or does Dubas really, really enjoy this guy so, so much that he's going to offer him another bridge deal?
I think maybe a bridge deal at like less money. They'll probably give him like a third year instead of like paying him up front for like a 2-year deal. I would say like maybe he makes the same or just under 3.5, like let's say 3.2 million for 3 years if he wants to take a pay cut. But he's another player. Like if you're gonna make changes to your roster, you take as much cap space as you can and you evaluate the market and maybe bring in someone cheaper, give another prospect an opportunity. And I would live with if Kerfoot's not back, I think you can live with that. You can get creative other ways. So I think that they could take their time with. It won't be so much of a loss.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too because he's done so much and he's actually been a lot better than people I think have expected come playoff time when it comes to scoring key goals, uh, taking what's it called? Creating penalties. I think this is a guy that's been a very underrated piece for this team for a while, and they chose Kerfoot over Engvall. When it came to the deadline, and I think this is where obviously he moves on, but I want to really focus in on three guys that I do think the Leafs need to re-sign. I'll start it off with the guy we got at the deadline. Luke Shen is a guy, Aulino, where you're looking at the back end, you're looking at Justin Hall being a free agent, where I think that's a foregone conclusion. He's gone.
Oh, you never
Um,
know. You never
I
know with
mean, yeah,
them.
you
You might
never
get
know.
$5 million.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he does come back, to be honest, but I'm just going to assume he's not back. I think Dubas really does love Timmins. I think Timmins plays full time next year with this team. But Luke Shen Aulino is a guy where you have to re-sign him based off looking at the chemistry with Morgan Riley. Shen was absolutely phenomenal in the postseason. I think he exceeded expectations. What do you think his next contract could be? Do you see it being around 2.5 mil? And what's the longest term you would give Shen?
Yeah, I think they're in a good spot with Shen because he won a Stanley Cup already, and this was like a full circle type of trade for him where I'm just even surprised. Like a few years ago, he was in and out of the league. It seemed like AHL gets called up. Looks like he might not even be in the league anymore. Like have to go to Europe, but he's had his most productive year this year, which is kind of crazy at his age now. Like it's starting to click. So I think it won't be a crazy number. I would say 2 years or maybe like 1.5 each year. Like I don't think it'll be more than that, but I think he's a reliable guy that you can have. I would bring him back. I agree with you about Timmins. Like his contract extension kicks in next year, but even though his age, I don't think they would trade him, even though it's a decent number for him. So I think Timmins takes Hall's spot, and then Shen slots in. So I don't think maybe like 1.5 is a realistic number.
Yeah, another guy I want to talk about too. I mean, Lilgren at times didn't look too good in the postseason, but again, he that's what happens when you don't play. When you don't play for so long, it eats at your confidence and your ability, and I think that kind of translated. But the one guy, Alino, that baffled me, we get rid of Rasmus Sandin to get Eric Gustafsson, and the guy does not play. And now he's a free agent. Do you see us re-signing Gustafsson, or do you think this is another scenario where we might be trading for a D down the line, and this guy's just a complete liability at this point?
Yeah, they just take the L and move on, I guess, if you're Dubas. Like that trade was clearly bad. They lose Sandine. They think Gustafson's going to be a big time like turnaround for them, and yeah, was pretty much a waste. So that was a bad trade. And like all the options you do have, like I think you have to draft pretty well here, and you can probably get a replacement at the free, even trade deadline next year. But free agency right now, there's going to be a lot of guys that are similar to Eric Gustafson and probably even younger too. So I think they'll just cut their losses with him.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, I think if we still had Sandin on this team, I think it would be we'd feel a lot more confident the next couple of years because Sandin had a hell of a run with Washington. But I want to now move on to Ryan O'Reilly. And this is the guy where we need to re-sign him. I know he probably wants 4 to 5 million a year. If I had to just make a guess, he's coming off that massive contract that Buffalo signed all those years ago. He won a Conn Smythe with that contract. He's to me, he's one of my favorite hockey players in the league. He is a true traditional hockey player. He wins the battles, he wins the face-offs, he's old school, doesn't have the visor. You gotta love this guy as a leader. Aulino, do you think we have a remote chance of re-signing Ryan O'Reilly? Because I've heard rumors that he might want to go back to St. Louis to close out his career, but Toronto is his home.
Yeah, this is going to be tough. I think he's going to look around for the best offer. I know Toronto, it's a good fit, but he's probably going to look at the depth and know that you're not going to be on the first or second line. You're going to be on the third line. And will they want to commit $5 million to a third line center that might play on the wing once in a while? Like, I don't know how realistic that will be. So if they don't have like a team friendly deal, I think that he's another player that they're just going to use as much salary as they can there to go after other free agents available. And I think I would like to have him back. It's just if it's going to be like 5.5, 6 million, I think they're in a no win situation there. So we'll probably have to wait till like the maybe first or second week of free agency before he makes his move. He might not be like one of those guys that makes his move the day of free agency opening.
I want to quickly end it here with the goalie situation. Um, I know obviously Brody at 5 million. I think he has 1 year left. I think if the Leafs can try and trade that contract, that's an absolute steal. But I do think Brody, he has been reliable. He's Giordano's duo. He's his partner. So Giordano's back next year. Probably going to play what? If you had to guess, like 40 games. I don't think he's going to play too
Yeah.
much. You're going to rest him. But you look at Joseph Wall, man. The guy comes in his own. Matt Murray injured all year. Please God, I hope they trade this guy. That contract is it's so bad. But you look at Joseph Wall, you look at Samsonov being an RFA. Aulino, are you going full in with Joseph Wall being your starter next year, or are you re-signing Samsonov, telling him he's the starter for now, and you're just going because I said to my Zio, I think you should probably go 41-41 next year.
Yeah, they're in a pickle with the goalies. They're in a like Murray played pretty well. Like I'll give him credit. At times he was playing well, but again, the injuries. Like when they signed Samsonov, I remember like that was the first thing I said. He's going to be the number one goalie come
You
playoff time,
did.
and ended up happening because Murray couldn't stay healthy. Like it was a nice story. They traded for Murray, and it looked like he was committed. He wanted to be healthy again, represent the Leafs, but the last year of his deal, I think they're going to look at trading him at the probably the draft. I think they'll look at teams and see if they can move up or down in the draft. I would look at Arizona, look at teams that are going to be tanking. Arizona's like easily the top to my like because of their deal right now. Like they're I don't know if their stadium or their arena like 2 years away, but they're definitely going to be a team that's tanking. They want to get as many top picks as they can, build up a market. So whatever does happen, whether they're there or they go elsewhere, they're going to have young, talented players that can like market in that area. So that's a team I think would be a realistic place for a guy like Murray. The 1 year left, you might have to take back close to $1 million, but Samsonov, he was good. He got them the first round in 19 years. So I think he deserves something there. And Joseph Wall was a proven goalie. 3 games in, he plays amazing. 920 saved. So this is a tough situation. I don't know how it's going to look at as a win, because even if you bring Wall back as a starter, you're going to be saying, okay, is he proven during the year? And he wasn't. And then if you have Samsonov, is he going to be that Washington Samsonov who was good for a stretch? And then that was the reason why they got Kemper. So this is going to be tough. A tough
I
off season for goalies.
I think with goalies, we're starting to realize that we were kind of spoiled in the early 2000s, eh? Like the amount of good
Oh, yeah.
goalies back in the day, like even as later as like 2014, like with Lundqvist, with Quick, with Price, with all like Fleury, Holtby, like all these guys were unreal. And now you look at there's like maybe 5 elite goalies in the league. Now, all you goalie lovers out there, I'm sorry. I just think there's only like 5 elite, like Vasilevsky, Sorokin, Saros, Shesterkin, and who? Hellebuck. Like those, I
Yeah.
think, are the
Hellebuck,
five
yeah.
elite goalies in this league. And maybe you could put Ottinger there now because he's proven every single time in the playoffs that he's a rock in net. So um, with the Leafs, it is tough. With a lot of teams, it's tough to really kind of see what the goalie situation is. But with Samsonov here, I'll close this podcast by saying I think he might ask for 4 million a year, and I think I don't know if it's deserving, but if you're the Leafs and you know that Murray's injury prone and you don't really have another goalie behind, you might have to bite the bullet and risk the 4 million because he's only 25 years old. Samsonov, I think he still can be an elite goalie. Aulino, he was drafted in the first round. So
Yeah.
usually goalies that are drafted in the first round, ask Ottinger, ask Vasilevsky, they're good goalies. So I think he can turn it around. I think this injury that happened in the postseason is obviously concerning. It was his neck. That is definitely concerning, but he's deserved the money. I think he's going to be offered. And I think I know we all love Joseph Wall and we're pumping his tires a lot, but I gotta wait and see for him to do it a full 82 games before I'm calling him comfortably the starter in an original six franchise. So I think we need to re-sign Samsonov. I think we will be cap tight, but I think we're gonna get the job done.
Yeah. And Murray, you can always LTIR him. It's just come like the start of the season, you got to make a decision there. Like, is Wool going to go back to the Marlies? Probably not. So you're going to have 3 goalies all year. Are you going to like string them along and give them false hope? Because what he showed in those 3 games, he might go up to his agent and they'll give a call to whoever the GM of the Leafs might be and say it's you know what time it is? It's 1 o'clock. Trade my guy or put him in net, and I think they're going to force their issue. And I think Murray is the odd one out here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Murray definitely is the and I hate to say it because dude, like when he got signed here, you could tell how passionate and how happy he was to come here. It's just the cards were not right. Like his groin is done. He can barely go side to side consistently now. He's more of like that traditional stay at home goaltender where he's not that mobile, but he does stop a lot of pucks. Whereas you have Samsonov, who's the aggressive guy. He's the guy that's kind of like the Jonathan Quick. He's all over the place. And I'm not going to compare Joseph Wall to Carey Price, but what we saw with Joseph Wall, how calm and composed he is, he's looking really, really good at his age. So it's tough too because Aulino Wall is only a year younger than Samsonov, which is hilarious to think.
Yeah.
But it's taken Wall a while to start producing. But this is definitely a situation we got to monitor because I'll ask you, how much do you expect Samsonov to get in this next contract?
Yeah, I'm surprised they even got him at that price. Like, that's a steal in and itself. So he'll probably want over 3.5. Like, I think 3.5 will be a starter. Washington, I think, should have kept him because with Kemper, I think they would have had a really solid duo and they would have pushed each other to be better. And if you know you can get Samsonov at that price, it's too good to pass up. So I think the Leafs bring him back, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 2-year deal and it's like 3.5 for the first year and like 3.8 to 3.9 the second year.
I like it. Well, there's big changes coming to Toronto, Aulino. We don't know when, we don't know who, we don't know how. All we know is this team come October is probably going to be a lot different. We got a lot more questions as the weeks roll on here, but as of right now, the Leaf season is officially over again. 7 straight years, man, of just not bringing success. Do you trade any of the core four guys? Do you roll it back? Who knows? But we all know changes are going to be made. This is Giancarlo Aulino and Chris Martelli in the zone signing out.